One of the greatest mistakes you can make in life is becoming too available to everyone. When people can reach you whenever they want, demand your attention whenever they feel like it, and expect your energy without earning it, something subtle begins to happen. Your presence loses weight. Your attention becomes ordinary. What once felt valuable becomes something people assume they can have whenever they want. This is not because you suddenly became less important. It is because human beings often place greater value on what is limited, protected, and difficult to obtain. Think about attention. If you give it to everyone equally, it becomes cheap. If you constantly respond to every message, explain every decision, accept every invitation, and rush to solve every person's problem, people may stop seeing your generosity as generosity. They begin seeing it as your responsibility. And once something becomes an expectation, appreciation often disappears. This is why you must learn the difference between being kind and being endlessly available. Kindness is a strength when it comes from choice. But when you cannot say no, kindness becomes a weakness that other people can exploit. You do not need to become cold, cruel, or arrogant. You simply need to understand that your time, energy, attention, and presence are resources. Resources become valuable when they are managed carefully. Imagine someone who is always trying to prove that they care. They respond immediately. They apologize even when they did nothing wrong. They constantly check whether everyone is happy with them. They change their plans to accommodate others. They explain themselves repeatedly because they are terrified of being misunderstood. At first, people may appreciate this behavior, but eventually, some will begin to expect it. The person has unintentionally trained everyone around them to believe that their own needs come second. Now imagine someone different. This person is respectful, but they have priorities. They listen, but they do not abandon themselves to please everyone. They help when they genuinely want to help, but they can say, "I can't do that right now." They do not panic when someone becomes disappointed. They do not chase people who withdraw their attention. They do not feel obligated to explain every choice they make. There is a quiet power in this behavior. Scarcity does not mean playing childish games or deliberately ignoring people to manipulate them. It means having enough self-respect to understand that your life cannot be permanently organized around other people's demands. You should have goals that require your attention. You should have responsibilities that matter to you. You should have time when you are unavailable because you are building something, learning something, resting, or simply living your own life. When you develop your own direction, you naturally become less desperate for approval. And when you become less desperate for approval, your behavior changes. You stop saying yes automatically. You stop laughing at disrespect just to keep the peace. You stop sending endless messages when someone does not respond. You stop trying to convince people of your worth. This is where a deeper psychological shift occurs. You begin to understand that your value does not increase because everyone approves of you. Your value comes from what you develop within yourself and what you consistently contribute to the world. A person who has no boundaries often communicates desperation without saying a word. Their actions say, "Please choose me. Please approve of me. Please do not leave me." But a person with standards communicates something entirely different. "I respect you, but I also respect myself." That distinction changes relationships. People pay attention to what you protect. If you protect your time, they learn that your time matters. If you protect your word, they learn that your commitments matter. If you protect your principles, they learn that your values are not for sale. If you protect your attention, they understand that receiving it is meaningful. The goal is not to make yourself artificially difficult to access. The goal is to build a life so meaningful that you are not constantly waiting for someone else to give yours meaning. Do not confuse availability with loyalty. You can be loyal without being permanently accessible. You can care about someone without answering every demand. You can be generous without giving away everything. You can love your friends and family while still maintaining boundaries around your time and energy. The moment you understand this, you stop trying to force people to recognize your value. Instead, you begin creating value through your actions. Your absence should not be a weapon. Your presence should simply have purpose. When you enter a room, you do not need everyone to notice you. When you speak, you do not need everyone to agree with you. When you leave, you do not need anyone to chase you. Your confidence comes from knowing that your life continues, regardless of who applauds, criticizes, accepts, or rejects you. That is the real meaning of becoming expensive. You are not expensive because you demand special treatment. You are expensive because you have developed something worth protecting. Your time has direction. Your attention has purpose. Your standards have meaning. Your presence is not something you distribute randomly. And once you stop giving yourself away simply to be accepted, people begin to encounter a different version of you. Someone who can be generous without being controlled, kind without being submissive, and present without being desperate. Respect is rarely created by demanding it. The strongest form of respect is built when your character, competence, discipline, and actions make it difficult for others to dismiss you. If you constantly tell people that you deserve respect, you may reveal that you are still dependent on their approval. But when you quietly develop yourself, keep your promises, control your emotions, and become someone others can rely upon, respect begins to emerge naturally. There is a fundamental difference between demanding value and creating value. A person can walk into a room and announce, "You need to respect me," but words alone do not create authority. Authority is demonstrated through behavior. It comes from knowing what you are capable of, understanding your principles, and refusing to abandon them whenever pressure appears. Think about competence. When you become genuinely skilled at something, you no longer need to spend all your energy convincing people that you are capable. Your results begin speaking for you. The person who has spent years learning, practicing, studying, and improving does not need to constantly advertise their intelligence. Their decisions reveal it. Their work reveals it. Their ability to solve problems reveals it. This principle applies far beyond careers or professional success. It applies to relationships, friendships, leadership, and everyday interactions. If you want people to value your opinion, develop judgment worth listening to. If you want people to trust you, become consistent. If you want people to take your commitments seriously, make fewer promises and keep the ones you make. Many people attempt to gain respect through appearance rather than substance. They speak loudly. They try to dominate conversations. They interrupt others. They exaggerate their accomplishments. They become aggressive whenever someone challenges them. They believe intimidation is the same thing as authority. It is not. Fear can make someone temporarily cautious, but genuine respect is built differently. It grows when people see that you have control over yourself. The person who can remain composed under pressure often possesses more authority than the person who reacts explosively to every challenge. Self-control is therefore one of the foundations of value. Imagine two people receiving criticism. The first immediately becomes defensive. They argue, attack, make excuses, and attempt to prove that the criticism is unfair. The second listens carefully. They consider whether there is something useful in the criticism, discard what is irrelevant, and continue improving. Which person appears more secure? The second. This does not mean accepting every criticism as truth. It means having enough confidence to examine information without allowing your emotions to control the process. When you do not need to defend your ego every second, you become harder to manipulate. Your standards also contribute to your value. A person with no standards accepts whatever treatment is offered. They tolerate broken promises repeatedly. They accept disrespect because they fear losing the relationship. They allow other people's chaos to become their own. Eventually, They teach everyone around them that there are no meaningful consequences for crossing their boundaries. But standards create clarity. When you decide what behavior you will accept and what behavior you will not accept, your relationships become easier to understand. You do not need to threaten people. You do not need to punish them. You simply respond consistently. If someone repeatedly ignores your boundaries, you create distance. If someone consistently disrespects your time, you stop making yourself endlessly available. If someone repeatedly breaks your trust, you stop giving them unlimited access to you. This is not about controlling other people. It is about controlling access to yourself. Your value also increases when you become independent of constant approval. If your confidence depends entirely on compliments, criticism can destroy it. If your confidence depends on your own standards and progress, other people's opinions have less power over you. You should be able to hear someone say, "I don't like what you did," without immediately collapsing into guilt. You should be able to hear, "I disagree with you," without assuming that you have lost your worth. You should be able to walk away from an opportunity that violates your principles, even when accepting it would be easier. That kind of independence is powerful because it tells the world that you cannot easily be purchased with approval. Develop yourself in private. Learn when nobody is watching. Practice when nobody is applauding. Build discipline when there is no immediate reward. Improve your communication. Strengthen your judgment. Learn from your mistakes. Become more reliable. Become more thoughtful. Become more capable. Then something interesting happens. You stop needing to announce your value because your behavior demonstrates it. People notice the person who consistently delivers. They notice the person who stays calm when others become emotional. They notice the person who does not gossip about everyone around them. They notice the person who can admit a mistake without becoming defensive. They notice the person who treats others respectfully while still maintaining clear boundaries. This is how value becomes visible. The goal is not to become superior to everyone else. The goal is to become difficult to replace because you have developed qualities that matter. A person who brings wisdom, discipline, reliability, creativity, courage, and emotional control into a room changes the environment without needing to dominate it. That is the kind of value that creates lasting respect. Instead of asking, "How can I make them respect me?" ask a more powerful question. What can I become that naturally earns respect? That question moves your attention away from controlling other people and toward controlling yourself. You cannot force someone to admire you, but you can become more competent. You cannot force someone to trust you, but you can become more consistent. You cannot force someone to value your presence, but you can build a life and character worthy of value. The strongest reputation is not created by demanding recognition. It is created by becoming the kind of person whose actions make recognition unnecessary. The moment you become dependent on other people's validation, you hand them a portion of your power. Your mood begins to depend on their reactions. Your confidence rises when they praise you and collapses when they criticize you. You start measuring your worth through attention, approval, messages, compliments, and invitations. Slowly, without realizing it, you stop living according to your own standards and begin living according to the expectations of everyone around you. This is why one of the most important forms of personal power is learning to stop chasing validation. There is nothing wrong with appreciating encouragement. Everyone enjoys being recognized for their effort, and positive feedback can be motivating. The problem begins when recognition becomes necessary for you to feel valuable. When you need someone else to constantly reassure you that you are intelligent, talented, attractive, successful, or important, you become vulnerable to their opinions. A person who controls your sense of worth can influence your decisions without ever giving you a direct command. Consider how easily attention can manipulate behavior. Someone ignores you, and suddenly you feel compelled to contact them again. Someone gives you praise, and you immediately want more. Someone criticizes your decision, and you begin questioning everything you believed. Someone does not respond to your message, and your mind creates dozens of explanations. You are no longer simply experiencing an interaction. You are reacting to the emotional rewards and punishments attached to it. The solution is not to become emotionless. The solution is to become internally anchored. You need an internal standard that remains stable even when external reactions change. You should know what you are working toward, what principles matter to you, and what kind of person you are trying to become. When those things are clear, other people's opinions become information rather than commands. Imagine building something meaningful. You work on it for months, perhaps years, without receiving much recognition. If your motivation depends entirely on applause, you will eventually quit. But if your motivation comes from mastery, purpose, and personal standards, you can continue even when nobody is watching. This is why quiet progress is so powerful. You do not need to announce every improvement. You do not need to tell everyone about every goal. You do not need to constantly display your achievements. Sometimes the most intelligent move is to work privately and allow the results to appear later. There is strength in letting people underestimate you while you continue developing. This does not mean hiding yourself out of fear. It means understanding that attention is not the same thing as achievement. Announcing your plans can create the temporary feeling of accomplishment without requiring you to complete anything. You receive the emotional reward before doing the difficult work. Instead, let the work come first. Study before you speak. Practice before you perform. Build before you advertise. Improve before you demand recognition. When the results eventually become visible, they carry more weight because they are no longer promises. They are evidence. Another important part of refusing validation is learning not to over-explain yourself. When someone misunderstands you, your first instinct may be to defend yourself with a long explanation. You want them to understand your intentions perfectly. You want them to approve of your decision. But not every misunderstanding requires a courtroom defense. Sometimes a simple explanation is enough. Sometimes silence is enough. Sometimes people will interpret your actions according to their own beliefs, regardless of what you say. If you spend your life trying to control every person's interpretation of you, you will exhaust yourself. You must accept that being misunderstood is sometimes the price of having independent standards. This does not mean ignoring legitimate criticism or refusing accountability. If you make a mistake, acknowledge it. If you hurt someone, take responsibility. If someone points out a genuine weakness, examine it. But do not confuse accountability with constantly begging for approval. There is a major difference between correcting a mistake and defending your ego. A person with internal confidence can say, "I was wrong," without feeling worthless. They can say, "I don't know," without feeling inferior. They can say, "I disagree," without becoming hostile. They can say no without writing an essay to justify it. That kind of emotional independence makes you harder to manipulate. When you stop chasing validation, you also become more selective with your attention. You no longer feel compelled to respond to every provocation. Someone attempts to pull you into an argument, and you can decide whether the conversation deserves your energy. Someone tries to make you jealous, and you do not automatically participate. Someone withdraws attention to get a reaction, and you do not immediately chase them. Your calm becomes a boundary. Your attention becomes something you direct intentionally rather than something other people can constantly capture. The most important shift is this. Stop asking, "What will they think of me?" and begin asking, "Does this action match the person I want to become?" That question changes everything. If you choose your actions based on approval, your behavior will constantly change depending on who is watching. But if you choose your actions based on principles, you become more consistent. You can be respected without being universally liked. You can be successful without receiving immediate applause. You can walk away from an opportunity without proving that you were right. You can remain silent without losing your authority. You can continue building even when nobody notices. Your life becomes stronger when your motivation comes from within rather than from the unpredictable reactions of other people. The goal is not to stop caring about people. The goal is to stop allowing their approval to determine your identity. Build quietly. Improve consistently. Let your actions accumulate. When your confidence comes from what you know you have built rather than what others say about you, praise becomes pleasant instead of necessary. Criticism becomes information instead of destruction. And attention becomes something you appreciate rather than something you desperately need. One of the clearest ways to teach people how to treat you is through the standards you consistently enforce. People observe what you tolerate. They notice what makes you leave, what makes you stay, what you forgive, and what you repeatedly accept. Your boundaries communicate information before you ever explain them. If you constantly tolerate behavior that violates your principles, you unintentionally teach others that your principles are negotiable. This does not mean becoming aggressive or looking for reasons to confront people. In fact, the strongest boundaries are often quiet. They do not require dramatic speeches, threats, or revenge. They require consistency. When someone crosses a line, you respond appropriately. When the same behavior happens again, you adjust the amount of access that person has to you. A boundary is not a demand that another person become exactly who you want them to be. A boundary is a decision about what you will do when certain behavior occurs. You cannot control another person's choices, but you can control your participation. Suppose someone repeatedly wastes your time. You explain your schedule, yet they continue arriving late or changing plans without consideration. You do not need to insult them or create a public confrontation. You can simply become less available for arrangements that repeatedly create the same problem. Your action communicates something stronger than an argument. Your time has value. The same principle applies to disrespect. If someone makes a rude comment once, you might address it calmly. If they understand and change their behavior, the situation is resolved. But if disrespect becomes a pattern, repeatedly explaining the same boundary may accomplish very little. At some point, your behavior has to communicate the seriousness of your standard. This is where many people struggle. They talk about boundaries, but they do not enforce them. They say, "I won't tolerate this again," and then immediately return to the same situation without changing anything. Over time, their words lose credibility because their actions contradict them. Your boundary becomes powerful when your behavior supports your words. You do not need to make people afraid of you. You need to become predictable in the right way. People should know that when you give your word, you mean it. When you say something is unacceptable, you will respond consistently. When you agree to something, you will follow through. When you decline something, you will not be pressured into changing your decision simply because someone becomes disappointed. This kind of consistency creates respect because it removes uncertainty. Another important part of boundaries is learning to stop explaining yourself excessively. When you establish a reasonable limit, you do not need to provide 20 reasons for it. The more you over-explain, the more opportunities you may give someone to debate your decision. "I can't do that. I've already made other plans. That doesn't work for me. I don't want to participate." Sometimes that is enough. A person who respects you may not always agree with your boundary, but they can understand that it exists. You do not need universal agreement before protecting your time and energy. At the same time, boundaries should not become excuses for selfishness. Respect has to move in both directions. If you demand that others respect your time while constantly wasting theirs, your standard is inconsistent. If you expect honesty while lying whenever it benefits you, your boundary has no moral foundation. Strong standards begin with yourself. You cannot credibly demand qualities from others that you refuse to practice. If you want respect, become respectful. If you want honesty, become honest. If you want people to keep commitments, keep yours. If you want calm communication, learn to communicate calmly. Your example gives your standards credibility. There will also be people who test your boundaries. Not necessarily because they are evil, but because they are accustomed to the old version of you. When you begin saying no after years of saying yes, someone may ask why you have changed. When you stop participating in unnecessary arguments, someone may accuse you of being distant. When you become less available, someone may claim that you no longer care. Do not automatically interpret their disappointment as proof that your boundary is wrong. Sometimes people are uncomfortable because they benefited from your lack of boundaries. You can acknowledge their feelings without surrendering your decision. You can say, I understand you're disappointed, but this is what works for me. You do not have to turn every disagreement into a battle. This is where emotional control becomes essential. If someone reacts badly to your boundary, the temptation may be to retaliate. But retaliation often turns a simple boundary into unnecessary conflict. The stronger response is composure. You do not have to punish someone for losing access to you. You simply have to decide what level of access is appropriate. Your time is limited. Your attention is limited. Your energy is limited. Your trust should not be unlimited either. Giving everyone unrestricted access to these resources can leave you exhausted and resentful.